Hi, Gloria Liebecker here with Healing You. Today, it's really blowing a strong wind outside. And when I looked out the window, I saw a lot of blackbirds flying all around my white horse. And I watched with fascination as this horse allowed the birds to land on him. And they were on his head and down his neck and his back, and they were grooming him. Not sure what they were finding out there, but I found it fascinating to watch how the horse tolerated this being encircled by a whole flock of birds. It was pretty fascinating. He seemed comfortable and at choice, and once he shook them all off and they came back, he moved away and they followed him, and it was just a curious thing to witness. It got me to thinking about what it's like to be in a group of others. And maybe we feel like we're different than the rest of the group. And how do we navigate that? When we feel different, or maybe we get triggered by something in a group, what happens inside? There's different possibilities. Maybe we go into the thought loop. That's an old pattern that we have around whether we're important or not, whether we're as important as someone else in the group, whether there's enough time for us. So we kind of come from this perception of whether I'm okay or I'm not okay. I'm acceptable or not acceptable. I belong or I'm excluded. What if you're in a group and it seems to you that others get more attention than you get? How do you get more attention? What does that look like? Maybe it's difficult to get a word in. How do you begin to speak up more without causing conflict within the group? There's so many different complexities that can arise in a group. There's a lot of complexities that can arise in just a one-on-one relationship. When you bring in more and more individuals to form a group, then you have a lot more complexity, a lot more points of view. And how do you stay open and curious and engaged and self-responsible? Well, rather than, if I get triggered in a group, let's think of a time I got triggered in a group. I'm sure there's a few times that that's happened. I remember there was one time that we did an exercise talking about, actually, it was towards the ending of a program where people had been meeting quite often throughout the year, that we stopped and we paused to reflect back of what was it like when you first stepped in to participate in this group. What were your perceptions of the other people that you now know much better? And there was an opportunity then to kind of note that down, my first perceptions, and now what I do know to be true, and then to go around in the group and to share with one another what we noticed. I remember with one individual in particular that I had felt uncertain. Boy, it's kind of difficult to put it into words. So there was a doubt and an uncertainty of whether I was welcomed by this other person. And so as we got to chat at the end of the program and share our perceptions, I was able to get more clear around what it was that communicated to my sense of self that maybe this wasn't going to be a person I was close to. And it really came down to the body language, my perception of when this person showed up. When I spoke, if they looked away, if they got busy. To me, it seemed as if I was being dismissed. As I got to know this person, though, I found out that sometimes they had more difficulty focusing, and especially in a group where you're sitting. And so what this person would do was to find ways to keep themselves present, which allowed them to have a little movement. Then they could actually hear better. Even though their eyes weren't on me, they were really listening. So that's a good example of how, unless you take the time to check in with another person, you truly don't know what their inner experience is, and you don't know what their perception is or what their truth is. And if we only go on what we think we know, then we really don't know the truth. So a practice that I like to be able to do requires a different way of thinking. I love to put on my curiosity glasses, first about myself, and then it empowers me to be curious about others. So what that might look like would be if I could rewind time and go back to when I first met this woman, and noticing that when I spoke that they looked away and then got busy doing something else and never really looked at me. What I would do differently is when we had a little break, I'd take a little time aside, first with myself, and notice what happened inside of me. Noticing I felt a little bit of a tingle in my face, like a little bit of shame came up, that hearing myself say, oh, I must not be important, I don't matter. And then breathing through that into my heart space and acknowledging that need for belonging, the need for acceptance and security. It begins within myself. So taking time to be with the beauty of those needs, how much I love when I accept myself, when I allow myself to be who I really am instead of who I am not. And to let that really radiate from my heart throughout my whole sense of self. And that really, with practice, doesn't take a lot of time, but it does take a focused intention. Then I'd like to go out, and as we have our break, check in with this other person. And it might sound something like, hey, I just wanted to acknowledge that when I was checking in back in our circle, I was noticing that your eyes were looking away and you were getting kind of busy, and I wondered what's happening for you, if I could check in with you around how that is for you. And then really listen with my heart to hear how it is for this other person. And so just pausing and coming back to present time right here, as I remember talking to this other person and hearing what their experience was like, I could imagine that then they would have said, oh, yeah, I loved getting to hear where you're from, and I really enjoyed hearing about your herd and your cats. And I just want to be honest and let you know that I have difficulty focusing my attention, and so I have certain strategies I use to keep myself as present as possible. And I want to assure you that I really am paying attention, even though it may not look like it. And how is that for you to hear? So the thing about having a check-in with someone else and staying engaged and curious in the conversation, both people matter. Even when you're part of a bigger group, when you take the time to stay in relationship with the individuals, the group all of a sudden, it can have a completely different feel to it. So what can contribute to these distortions or misunderstandings, misperceptions, is some of us grew up in cultures, in our family cultures, where we didn't get to practice that way of being in relationship with one another. So it can be a brand new skill set, let alone a new mindset, a different way of even perceiving life. Some of us didn't have someone to check in with. Nobody checked in with us. Or maybe not only did no one check in with us, but maybe we were bullied or pushed around or shamed, belittled. So being willing to have the courage to dare to reach out and to check in with somebody authentically and transparently, that does take courage. And so if you resonate with this at all, about what it's like to be a part of a group or even part of a conversation with somebody with that level of transparency and honesty, maybe start with your first steps being noticing when you are triggered in a conversation or in a group setting, and slow it down to be really curious about your own experience. Start right in your own heart space first. It can help to just write out a little brief observation. So that would look like whatever a camera or a video would pick up. So you wouldn't have any judgments. You wouldn't have any opinions about it. It would just be a true, clear observation. And from there, then slow down and drop into your heart to invite compassion forward. To really know that you matter to you. And from that place, you can check in and notice how you're feeling. Notice when you think about that observation, whatever the trigger may have been. Maybe it was as simple as what I had. When I started to speak, that other person looked away and down. That's an observation. The other person looked away from me or looked off to the left and looked down. Then notice how do you feel as you remember that? And note down how you felt. I felt sad and embarrassed. And then link it into, well, what would you have liked to have experienced? Well, I would have liked to have been welcomed. I would have liked to have been, had connection. I would have liked to have had interest. So I would distill that down into my need to know I matter, that I'm of value. And so when I stand in that energy of knowing that I matter and that I'm valued, I just noticed even now I just shifted and I sit up more straight and full, and my chest is more expansive and open. So take time to drop into your heart right there with what you value, what you would like to receive, how you'd like to be in relationship. And sometimes just being in that place, that really connects me to my roots. It allows me to have an inner shift to where then I'm curious. I'm like, so I do value myself and I do accept myself and I would like to have a relationship with this other person, so I'm going to check in with them. So that curiosity can open up my heart to being willing to check in with another person. But the first step is always self-connection first. Self-connection with your own heart, to deepen into your own values, to uncover what is it that you're really needing. What is that part of you needing in the moment? And to take time to be there. Take time to grow that pathway to be really, really strong. Polly's agreeing. Are you agreeing, Polly? She's like, yes, do that. It's a great idea. Yeah. And if you'd like to reach out, you can reach me at healingyouShow.com. Thanks for being on this journey with me today. Healing you.